Thanks to Martin for the use of his netbook. Is that a bit out of focus? Or is it just... Is that better? Okay. Okay, I'm going to talk about AngularJS. How many people know what that is? Oh, loads. Great. Great. So is there a lot of web developers then as well? Hands up. Okay, good. I know a couple of them anyway. I work with Laya Healthcare, so we have a public website where we sell a lot of health insurance, and in the last couple of years we've started doing AngularJS, and we've had good and bad experiences with it, so I'll talk about some of them. For people who don't know, AngularJS actually is a model view controller framework in JavaScript, so it's pretty handy for doing a lot of nice, rich applications in JavaScript. I'm going to talk about three different things. I'll talk about how you make any web page faster in general, and then I'll talk more specifically about Angular, and then I'll talk about the perception of speed or the illusion of speed, which in some ways is what counts the most. So when a user is on your page, that they feel everything is moving really quickly. I'm sure you probably know this a lot better than I do, you know?
Faking live.
Yeah. So a lot of the asynchronous loading and that kind of stuff that you'll be doing. So this is the page. Doesn't look much now compared to your lovely game demos. I should have gone first. It's called Create Your Scheme. It's a web page that we have where you can customize your healthcare. So on this side here, you're just sort of choosing how many people you have in your family. And then you have a bunch of sliders here, and you slide them across, and you get more, better private hospitals, or you get better money back from your GP. And then on this side, there's a whole detailed list of benefits. So if you want to drill into it to see exactly which benefits are covered in your plan, you can see it all over here. And then there's a little link here to say which hospitals are you covered. So that'll flick you over to another page, which will actually tell you every hospital that's covered in your particular scheme. So whatever product you've chosen, it'll tell you can get a scan in the bonds, or it'll tell you get maternity. So there's a lot of information, and it's all just one single page app. So it's one Angular app, but you feel like you're going across multiple pages. Okay, so what happens when you browse any page on the web? So say you're a user and I'm your browser. You're going to put a URL into the address bar and look for a page. Then I've got to go over to the server, make some requests, and I come back with a HTML page. So that HTML page has a little bit of content, maybe a little bit of text, a few paragraphs, but most of what it is just like a big shopping list for other stuff. So you've got a whole load of CSS files, you've got a bunch of JavaScript files, a bunch of JavaScript libraries, you've got a whole load of images, and then I've got to go and get all of them, put them all together, and render a nice page for you. So there's a great site, it's called webpagetest.org, and you can profile any website that you want. And it'll even let you choose like different browser versions. So they've got like, I don't know, thousands of virtual machines in the cloud, and you can choose like an old version of Internet Explorer and run your web page. And up the top it'll show you screenshots of how it looked as it was going along. So the first one here, you can't really see it here, but it'll kind of show a header and a footer appearing, and then the rest of the page starts to appear. And this view here then is a timeline. So you can see all the requests. So just for that one relatively simple looking web page, you have more than 50 requests for different things. Now when you look at that from a distance too, it's kind of nice, because where you see lots of requests stacked on top of each other, that's good. That means lots of things are happening in parallel. Right here is not so good. That's where Angular kicks in, and that's partly to the way we deployed it. That's not great. There's a bit of a lag there. It's getting something very big and there's not much else going on. And then it picks up here again. it's good to understand a little bit about how the page gets rendered so you can know where to improve the performance. So there's a bunch of things that the browser has to do. It has to parse that first HTML page you get. So it does it from the top to the bottom, starts reading through the head and the body, basically sending off threads then to get the stuff. It's getting CSS as well at the same time. So then it's got to combine the HTML and the CSS. The HTML is mostly content and the structure of that content, so paragraphs, headers. And then the CSS is telling a lot of style, like different colors, a bit about layout. So you combine that HTML and CSS, and the browser will come up with a final box model of exactly what pixels to draw on the screen, and then it'll paint it. So it's probably something similar kind of process in games, I imagine, where you're getting all these assets and layers and stuff. This then is the anatomy of one of our pages. So we don't just have Angular applications. We have a whole content management system because we've got loads of pages on our website that marketing look after that have lots of good healthcare information or tips for staying healthy or other products that we're selling. So our content management system owns the top and the bottom of the page, the header and the footer, and marketing can add different items if they want new promotions or they want new menu items, they'll add them there. So rather than us having our own header and footer inside that application that you saw, we pull that in from the CMS. Then we've got our own HTML inside the page, JavaScript, CSS. Then you've got all these dependencies. So we're using AngularJS and Bootstrap, and they depend on jQuery. And then we've got Moment and Underscore, a whole bunch of other libraries. And then we've got our own code as well. So you've got a lot of dependencies. Then we've got analytics. We use Google Analytics. So we're measuring like how many people are coming to the site, how long they're staying there. And we have all these. Have many people used Google Analytics? Yeah. So you've got all these sales funnels, you know. So that's probably our biggest metric for the page is like, of all the people that land on this page, how many people actually go on and buy something? And it's quite successful that way. For all the things that we've done badly, it still sells quite well. And then you've got all this marketing stuff. So we do lots of not banner ads, we do lots of pay-per-click ads on sites like joe.ie. So then they've got all these marketing tags, and when they land on the page, we know where they came from, and there's conversion rates for those ads as well. Okay. So the first thing you have to do with all those assets that you have, the best thing you can do is shrink everything. So if you've got you get an image from marketing, it's probably 0.5 meg. You take it into GIMP or Photoshop and you compress it as much as you can until you lose a bit of quality, and then you go up a little bit and you get that to the smallest size you can get. Then you do the same with your JavaScript and your CSS and your HTML. So the smaller the pieces are going out over the network, the faster they're going to come down. Do a lot of people use grunt? The web? Okay. So we use grunt and we use Node. Actually, this is probably outside of grunt. We're using. Are you guys using require.js as well? Anybody? Yeah. So require is brilliant for managing dependencies, and the nice thing about it is if you've got your dependencies set up, you can run an optimizer as well beforehand. So that's basically optimizing all the CSS files that I've specified. And there's a thing here. We've set mangle to false because one of the things it can do is just, instead of like the big long function names and class names that you have in your JavaScript files, it'll mangle them down to like A1, B1, C, these kind of names. But sometimes that doesn't work with Angular's dependency injection, so we've got that turned off. The other thing is gzip. So that wasn't working on part of our website actually when we deployed this first last year, and that was a huge difference. So Apache has a brilliant zipping module. Any static files like HTML or JavaScript or CSS, it'll compress it up and it gets down to your browser then in no time. And we've got a pretty good network. We've got a third party that manages our network, so they've got another, we have our web servers, and then beyond that, they've got another device, it's called a NetScaler, and that can do lots of nice caching as well. So once your files are zipped, they go all the way out to the edge of your network, and they're picked up very quickly. Another great thing you can do is take out the trash. So one of the most popular CSS tools is called less, and it's well named because with CSS, I think less is definitely more. The more CSS you can throw out the door, the better. When I came to our project, we had started it from another project, and it had this screens.css file which had like 1.5 megs of CSS. So I don't know how anyone could create that, but the first thing I did was take it out and just see what broke, you know. And there was a couple of things that were a bit off color and a few things out of place, but it was easy just to write a few lines of CSS then to fix them instead of trying to fix this big monster. The other thing is to make less requests. So that's your mobile network on a Friday afternoon. The more requests, the more cars you have to send down that, the longer you're going to be waiting for them to come back. So if you bunch stuff up together, if you combine your files, you'll have less requests. So instead of that 50 requests you saw earlier was probably 150 before we started doing this. So that's require again. So in require, we've specified all our dependencies, all the external libraries, and all the internal controllers, services, Angular directives that we've written. We have them all specified, and then we run a task that basically puts all our dependencies into one file. So initially, we actually combine too much, you know. If you don't tell it not to, it'll stick Angular and jQuery and all the other stuff into that one file as well. So you have this thing over on this side where you say the path is empty, and that basically is telling require don't put Angular into the same file, you know. Don't put jQuery in there, because you have to think not just of your own page anyway, you have to think about the other pages on your site. So if somebody has gone to the home page on the site and that's using a bit of jQuery, well, they already have jQuery in the browser, but if you stick it into your main.js, the browser doesn't know that it's in there as well. So you pull out all your independent libraries. Actually, the first day we went live, we didn't have half that stuff turned on, and our project manager, Mike Byrne, who isn't here, but he called me about 7 o'clock from home, and he was like, "Jesus, Phil, like, what the hell is going on here? The page is broken." So he was on a network down in Connacht on a dial up near Fermoy, and the thing was taking like minutes to come down. So this stuff, once we started turning on all this stuff, we cut the time to about 1/10 of what it was. So combining CSS is another thing. It's like the same thing with your JavaScript files. What you do is, because I like to break up the CSS into nice small pieces, you know, especially if you've got kind of funky components like accordions and sliders that have lots of custom CSS to fix their positions. I like to pull that stuff out into a separate file, which is great for development, but then when you go to deploy it, you've got the problem we were talking about before of lots of requests, because you've got all these little bits. But if you use import statements, you can run the optimizer over this, and it'll, as it's minifying it, it'll put it all into one CSS file as well. And then reuse, you know, so don't have Angular version 1.2.21 in one page of your site and 1.2.20 in another page and 1.2.22 in another one. You know, settle on one version and put it in a common folder so that all your pages can benefit from somebody having downloaded it once. Same with jQuery. If you know, something like jQuery, you can use a CDN because it's so popular. Chances are someone is going to have it from their Gmail account anyway. Make sure you're downloading in parallel this isn't as important for the newer browsers, but some of the older browsers, like the previous to IE8 versions, would just wait and block stuff while they were downloading the JavaScript. So they download an external library and then block the parsing of the page while they were downloading it and execute it. And if that download was delayed, it was even worse, like you were blocking the whole rendering of your page. Most browsers will have 6 threads, you know, so use them all. And that 6 threads is per domain. So if we have a subdomain, images.laya.ie, then you get another 6 threads for that. So you can really speed your page up. There's some nice attributes as well, you know, when you have a script tag, you can have this async attribute. So what that means is that it won't block the rendering at all. And that's great, especially for third-party scripts. So if you're, you know, with your analytics and your marketing tags and all that, async basically tells the browser, I don't care about this script when it runs. You know, just get it asynchronously and run it at some stage. Defer is another tag that can be used. It sounds even better than async because you can keep the order. So when you're going top to bottom on the page, and if you have a dependency, for example, Bootstrap depends on jQuery, defer will manage that dependency in terms of, like, it will only execute them in the same order. So it'll get them asynchronously and then execute them in the order that you had defined them. But the trouble with that one is it's not very well supported in a lot of browsers, so we don't use it. And anyway, for the guys using Require, you probably use Require to manage your dependencies. I think you were using it, were you?
Yeah, we do that, yeah.
Yeah, so
that takes care of all that. Like,
so you do a data main and you list it out. And
yeah.
I mean, Require was brilliant because it was around before all this async stuff was supported in most of the browsers. The other thing is prioritize. So don't try to serve dessert before they have the dinner. Get the stuff that you need right away and get that down. Kick off the big downloads. You know, the browser will follow the order you have on the page, and so will Require. So kick off the big downloads first and get them working. And try to render the page immediately. So that's a snapshot of our page loading. Can anyone see where the Angular app is in that? Yeah. So at that point in time, it's just there, you know. The header is very static, and the footer, they're coming from the CMS. And we just have this placeholder. So if you've got an NGView, you can put any content you want into the NGView, and it'll be showing until Angular loads and does all its stuff. So for that one, we just put a spinning GIF. Normally, you don't see it if you're on a decent network, but if you're on a slow network, like Mike down in Connacht, at least he knows something is happening. Okay, so that most of that stuff was just to talk generally about how to improve any web page. And there's some brilliant tools out there. The web page test is a good one. PageSpeed. Have you guys used Google PageSpeed? So it gives you a lot of good tips. It gives you a score, you know. The thing about a lot of those tools is, though, they'll only tell you for one page. You know, you point one page, they'll tell you that. They won't tell you, like, your overall site if you're doing good stuff like sharing common libraries. Okay, so for Angular then, NGinclude, most of the things in Angular start with an NG. So NGinclude, NGView, resolve, NGCloak, and then bind once is something outside of Angular. It's kind of a replacement library that we've used. NGinclude is probably my favorite part of Angular. So it's really just a neat little way of having little pieces of HTML, like you would have had with handlebars, where you'd have an external HTML template, and then you load it up and it compiles it with your data and includes it into your page. Well, Angular will do it just with one little tag where you reference the file. So it's brilliant for developing. that the page that I showed you, we had broken up into like 10 different little pieces, you know, and you can work away on one little slider and not be worried about the rest of the page, and then it all pulls it together nicely, you know. So it's brilliant for developing, but unfortunately, you know, if you just throw that straight into the production server, then what you get is like an extra 10 requests. And not only do you get an extra 10 requests, but they happen at a bad time, you know. So if you saw in that original picture where I showed the timeline, you had all this stuff, then you had Angular, and then you had a whole bunch of other requests. So those whole bunch of other requests were for all the extra HTML, all those NG includes, because the original HTML page has none of that. So the browser doesn't even know they're coming, you know. It loads up Angular and then it's got to go get all this extra stuff. So there's a really nice grunt task called NGTemplate. And what that does is it just looks through all your HTML files and it puts them all together and it minifies them into nice short strings, puts them into a JavaScript file and configures Angular to load them up. So it all goes into your main.js file. It kind of looks like that. So the 10 HTML partials that I had before, like all those separated files, now they all go into one JavaScript file, and that app.run is called as soon as your Angular module loads. So it's packaged up in the one file that goes down with your application, so the browser has it straight away, and as soon as it kicks off Angular, it puts this into memory, so the page loads almost instantly. Resolve. Has anyone used Resolve? You guys? It looks like a great idea, but it's not. It looks like kind of require.js. It's going to manage all your dependencies before you hit the page. Basically what it says is like if you're on a route to the next page, make sure you make all these calls, get all this data before you get there. So we had a hospitals page that I showed you at the start. When you've kind of played around and you've chosen the healthcare that you want, then you click and you want to see the hospitals. I had a resolve on that, and you click to the hospitals and then nothing happens, you know. Then you end up clicking it a couple of times and you're still waiting, you know, and it doesn't give you any indication of what's supposed to happen. NGView. So NGView is Angular's router. You can have, in our case, we had a landing page. We had another page where you could go and see the details of all your schema, and we had that hospitals page. So we had 3 routes. I think if you have too many routes, your app is probably too big, you know. So it's nice to have a single page app, but I don't think it should be like a whole Gmail app, you know. It's still nice to have smallish pages. And NG-Cloak. So NG-Cloak is basically a bit of CSS that you put that kind of hides the stuff on your page until it's ready to be shown. So a lot of Angular, you'd have like this kind of mustache syntax, you know, in your HTML, and certain browsers like IE8 will just show that up straight away. You know, you don't want people looking at that. So this NG-Cloak is like an attribute that hides that until Angular is ready and it's got all the data and it's merged it with your HTML, and then it's ready to show it. But the thing to do, instead of having one cloak where you hide the whole page and then suddenly it appears, you know, is to have lots of little ones, so the parts of the page come in then as they're ready. Bind once is something that I think Wilson found. So it's not an Angular thing at all. It's actually a replacement for something that doesn't work very well in Angular. Angular has this concept of watchers. So when you change data in your model, these watchers kick off and they update the page. But the trouble is, like when you have big lists of things, it sets up like a watcher for every line in the list. So if you have hundreds of rows in a table or hundreds of tabs or whatever, it'll start to eat into the performance of the page. And if you're going to click on a next link or something, it can slow all that down as well. Okay, so so we talked about web pages in general, some specific things about AngularJS, and then I think the other thing that's really important is this perception of speed, or a kind of a illusion of speed. And a good way to look at this is to try and be a glass half full kind of person. So I am by nature pretty optimistic, and if you apply that to your web design, it's actually a good approach. So you just assume things are going to work. You know, when you make a request to the network, you just assume it's going to work, and you show the user the result. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to be right. And the time when it fails, you just show them the error. So there's 2 things there: show success and show the next page. So if I edit an attribute, Gmail does it all the time. If I edit an attribute, or if I send a mail or anything, Gmail will show me a happy result. Yeah, it's sent. And then in the background, it's kicking off the AJAX request, and it's doing whatever it is really doing in reality. But I think it's finished, and I move on to the next task. And it frees you up. You're not thinking like, did it work, didn't it work? If it didn't work, it'll come back, and it'll give you the error. And in terms of Angular, what you can do, it's one of the great advantages of a single page app is that you can show the next page, you know? So in the example I gave you with the hospitals page, where I clicked and I had to wait because it was resolving the stuff, I just took out the resolve. So what I do now is I just show the next page. It doesn't have the data yet, but I've got the headers, I've got the titles, and then by the time the user gets his eye on the page, the data is most likely going to be there, and it's going to fill out the page. So I'm just assuming things are going to work. So that's an example. Down here, eventually, you'll have Cork, Dublin, Mayo, Belfast, all the counties and all the hospitals listed. But just as soon as you click on the link, this stuff starts to appear. And then in the background, I'm calling a Node.js service, and I'm getting all the hospital JSON, and I'm parsing through it, and I'm getting all the information for your plan, and all that's happening. And I'm just saying, that's going to work, you know? Now, if it doesn't work, obviously you have to handle the error and show the user something. There's no data for your plan. But 9 times out of 10, it's going to work. Okay, if you take one thing out of this talk, I would say use this Chrome developer tool, device mode. So this is a great tool to show you that whole thing of like, what is your user's perception of speed, how they experience your website. It's got a device mode, so you can see the size, different sizes of device. You know, you can pick an iPad or an iPhone or whatever kind of device you have, and that's okay. There's lots of other tools to do that. But it's got a neat thing up here. It's called network, and what you can do is you can throttle it down so it simulates a really slow network. So I can pretend I'm Mike Byrne up in Connacht, sitting at my dial-up and looking at this page, and it'll show exactly how it renders. You know, you'll see the spinning gear, you'll see the stuff gradually appearing, you'll see any jumps that you don't want the user to see, you know. So it's brilliant for doing this kind of stuff. Okay, what's that? All right, so I think I'm done there. And any good questions there? Or bad ones?
Just a couple of additions there.
Oh yeah, good.
Bind once is actually in Angular 1.3 now, so you
nice.
can do colon, and that'll only bind it once. You won't set up any watchers.
Brilliant.
Another thing that's quite useful is ng annotate. So if you use that, it'll annotate your dependencies for you, and then you don't have to worry about your
This is about the mangling, is it?
Yeah, when you do the uglification, it won't mangle.
Brilliant.
It won't mangle your injections and. So
nice, yeah, nice. Well, we'll try that. We're kind of stuck on Angular in a way because we still have about 10% of our users that are on Internet Explorer 8. So that's only supported up as far as Angular 1.2. So if we can get all those people off the old XP machines, then we can kind of move on with it. But nice one.
Yeah, my question is probably stupid, but Angular works on the browser side or both sides?
Yeah, it works on the browser side. It does. It gets loaded up into memory and it renders the page. All the rendering is done on the browser side. All the templating is done on the browser side. It just, I mean, it uses AJAX requests and stuff, but
yeah, but the AJAX request, so what's the language on the backend then?
on the back end, whatever you want, you know, like we have in our side, we use Node.js a lot, which is great for us because we're JavaScript developers and it's JavaScript on the front end and JavaScript on the back end. It makes it much easier, like, for us to switch and chop and change, you know.
Two questions. The first one is it only you only go as far back as IE8, do you? Don't do IE7?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then, do you ever come across problems? We come across problems every so often where older versions of operating systems on mobile phones, like iOS 4, for example, sometimes has different treatments of JS or JavaScript in browsers.
Yeah.
And you start to see unusual behavior, and your JavaScript breaking everything else in some cases. And have you ever come across, like, in the way that, you know, for in Chrome, the device tool that can help you emulate these older mobile operating systems?
In Chrome, that tool, I don't know if it really emulates the devices as such. The only, like, it just shows, it emulates the screen resolution and the screen size. And then what I really like about it is the network stuff, you know, the network throttling, because before that I was putting all these kind of sleeps into my Node.js services to try and simulate slow connections and all, and it was much more of a pain to manage it, you know.
Yeah.
But as far as the mobile browsers, our site actually isn't even mobile friendly yet. That's something that we're doing now, is to make it more responsive. So it wasn't even supported on mobile before. So that's the kind of thing we'd be hitting now. But we did have something kind of neat, because we're using Google Analytics. What we did was we put in an error service. So if you get an error on the page, you know, predominantly AJAX errors is what we were interested in. It will send a message to Google Analytics, you know, and it was really helpful because we had some problems with our network. The guys managing our network at one point, and we were getting, like, we could see in Google Analytics, like, that every hour at 2 minutes past the hour we were getting a bunch of errors, you know. So basically we had all our users out testing and reporting errors for us, you know, and we went to the network guys and they had some kind of scheduled thing on the firewall that was basically shutting down all the connections on the hour. So they, you know, we never would have known that, and that's one of the things, like, when you write a web app, sometimes you don't know, like, how are people using it, you know, what kind of problems they're having, like, you know, like, there's no JSON in the page or something, or there's some basic JavaScript functionality missing. So that,
especially with the number of ways that people consume websites now.
Totally, yeah.
It's a really difficult thing to manage. Just one last one. Google, you know, the site speed in Google Analytics.
Yeah.
How do you feel? What do you think about that? Do you find that that's accurate enough? Or?
I think it's a good indicator, actually. Like, it's definitely a good first step, and then some of the tips you have to kind of take with a pinch of salt, you know. You know, like, one of the things it tells you is to inline some of your CSS.
I don't mean the page speed. I mean site speed in Google Analytics.
Yeah, the thing that you see for tenths of seconds waiting for Google Analytics.
No, it's not. That's sorry. It's in Google Analytics itself. So you got PageSpeed test which is very
to measure your site speed, is it?
Well, yeah, you get a result back, and it's like we find anyway that it's always like 7 seconds or something like this for page loads, and we know are loading in like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
You know, and occasionally it's things like live chat or Facebook or something like that is taking up the time occasionally, but. I never feel confident in trusting that as a site speed indicator, and I don't know what to do.
I noticed it in PageSpeed, actually.
Yeah.
The same kind of thing. Like, when you run PageSpeed, sometimes it'll tell you like 6 seconds or something. And I'm like, how far is it counting? You know. Yeah. And it kind of comes back to the last stuff about, does it really matter? You know. It's like. you know, maybe it's waiting for some live chat or something else, and it's counting that. But as long as the user can see the page and interact with it, that's really all they care about, you know. So that's what you kind of got to get to, is like, what are they seeing, you know? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter what the metric is, if if they're seeing jumps, you know. That was the other thing, like, because of the way we were loading Angular and loading all the partial views. You know, you'd get the header and footer, then you'd have a spinning gear, and that'll be waiting for a bit. Then there was a jump, and then Angular went off and got all the little partial HTML page. So then there was like, do. You know, it didn't look good, you know. So it was about, I think it's about fixing all that things. Like, people will wait a certain amount of time if it kind of looks nice and it flows well.
And what is your page speed at the moment?
What is it?
Approximately.
It's a few seconds because we haven't fixed all that stuff.
All
like
right.
Like the page is still the one that we put up last Christmas. You know, we've been working on other stuff, and now this year we're kind of, it's like Groundhog Day. Here we are, Christmas again, and we're doing another iteration on that page, and that's where we're trying to. That's why I'm looking at this stuff now, because I'm trying to fix all the things that I wish I'd fixed last year. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
You were saying that you made that page last year.
Yes.
How long does it take to make that kind of development?
Depends on how many people are in your marketing department. No, I mean, you could have a page in a couple of weeks, but then when everyone reviews it and puts their own stamp on it, and they want this moved over there and this is up here, and you know, that process takes a long time, you know. And actually, we have a very good test team. You know, they really run through the rigors of everything, and they take a lot. They would take like weeks and weeks on it. You know.
How you were saying you're using 1.2 and you got like all this back support and stuff like that. Like, how do you? I'm guessing you're going to be supporting browser stuff for ages. Like, how do you convince someone who wants to be a developer in JavaScript to like basically kind of write archaic libraries that then you support? Like, not archaic, you know what I mean? Yeah. You're supporting a pretty old version, and you want to hire like talented people to write that stuff, but you're hiring them to basically learn obsolete stuff in a way. Yeah. It's like, how do you like balance that to make them feel like you're getting something? Well, you know what I mean? What I'm trying to say.
I know I do. Yeah.
I guess there's enough people offering money to do JavaScript stuff, so it's kind of like more money. Yeah.
It's also a challenge in some ways in its own right, supporting these. But it's like pre IE8. Yeah. If anybody if we don't even support IE8 anymore, for example, from now on. Yeah. Because certain of the libraries we use, it's just too much of an overhead. And the way that we convince people not to let us not support things like that is by adding additional costs. So you've got your IE8 tax, your IE7 tax, your IE6 tax, as it used to be. Relex did all of Ireland a great service there 2 days ago when they stopped supporting IE6 completely because of the SSL3 issue. But like certain things you can tolerate because it's challenging to try and support that kind of stuff. But then if you went to somebody and said, yeah, you've got to build an Angular app and support something like IE7.
Because there's like so many like cool JavaScript apps going on that like people want to be involved in there. Like Angular 2.0 is like a big change, and everyone's contentious about it, but people want to try it out and stuff. And the app you're running is kind of
it's a good point too. Like what you call old. Do you know what I mean? Like Angular 1.2 is last year. You know what I mean? It's not
but
that
JavaScript's
old.
moving so fast. It's like
like we're kind of trying to take the approach now that we'll support IE8, that it works on IE8, but it's not pixel perfect, you know. So we're trying to say like we don't want to invest a load of time, because you could spend half your time on IE8, you know, and you want to be, like you say, developing good stuff and new stuff, you know, and there's only like 10% of the people on it, and we suspect most of them are in work when they're doing it, you know, and because corporate PCs, a lot of them are still on XP, and XP doesn't go beyond IE8. So I think we'll get rid of that pretty quick, and once IE8 is gone, then it's much faster, you know, like Internet Explorer updates are coming faster now, so that problem is definitely disappearing. And you know, as somebody who worked with IE6 IE8 is a fucking hell of a lot better than that.
With screen readers for the blind, the rumor is links. ASCII is the way to test those.
Okay.
For things like sliders, obviously won't work with screen readers.
Yeah, we have buttons.
Have you tried the links?
Yeah, actually, Angular has pretty good support for that in the newer versions, but we can't go there because we're still stuck in IE8, you know. But it has this whole ARIA kind of stuff built into it.
So your screen will work with a screen reader.
I should test it a bit more. I can't say everything's going to work in it, you know.
Yeah.
How complex does a page need to be before you consider applying AngularJS to it? Like,
That's something actually, yeah, that's something that we're talking about a lot recently, you know, because we have lots of pages that just have jQuery and they're perfectly good, you know, and you can do, if you have something like handlebars, you can do dynamic templates. I think we're kind of saying like if it's got a couple of views, you know, like by a view we mean like almost the whole screen is changed, you know, then it's worth doing it in Angular. And Angular it's simple enough at the start, you know, like I think as you use it a lot, like to know it well, it's difficult, you know. But to know to get guys working, you can get lots of developers working on it pretty quickly. And if you just tell them the pitfalls, then they can work around that pretty quickly. And now that we're doing a lot of stuff with the optimization, then we've kind of solved the problems, so we don't have to solve them again, you know. So once all that stuff is solved, it's actually pretty easy to work with it. I mean, would you have that opinion? You're obviously doing stuff with Angular.
Angular is easy to work with.
Yeah, once you know it.
There's kind of a learning curve of when you look at it first, everything is actually really straightforward and easy because you just look at the HTML stuff and all that stuff's very intuitive. And then there's probably you go up this big massive peak where you're like, you know, it's a bit over my head. But then once you get that plateaus and then you're plain sailing. Yeah,
that was my experience, and that seems to be most people's experience. And sometimes I even think like, was it worth it? You know, if I'd known like a year and a half ago that you'd have to put so much into it to get to this same level, I could have spent 3 or 4 more months on handlebars and jQuery and done a lot of the same stuff, you know. So I'm not entirely convinced by it, but there's some stuff I love about it, like that NGView stuff is really neat, you know, and even the views, like the concept of the router is quite neat, and the way it's all packaged together as well, you know, like if you were going to do the same thing somewhere else, you'd need jQuery and Backbone for your kind of model view controller and handlebars for your templates, and so you'd be kind of sticking a few things together. Are you still using Angular?
Yeah.
Is it your main kind of framework?
Yeah, it would have been.
And is anyone else using a different MVC? Like, is anyone using Ember or Backbone?
Knockout generally.
Which one?
Knockout.
Knockout.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you find that?
Pretty good, to be honest.
Did you look at Angular as well? You did?
We went on a site where you can compare all these frameworks, and essentially, like after we went through them all, we kind of just settled with Knockout because it had we thought it had less code required to do certain things.
Yeah.
And we just settled with that really.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of kind of bullshit talked about Angular as well, but the fact that Google is behind it, I think there's a huge community, you know. So like things like you said with bind once, you know, somebody did a neat library that solved the problem, and then the next release of Angular they pulled that in. It's pretty much that code, I'd say, is it?
And a nice thing about a well-used library and a big community is if you come across a problem, it's pretty likely you're not the first. It's not the first time someone's come across it, so you can find an answer pretty quick.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of your problem with the games, like, you know, Stack Overflow is like bubbling with answers about every little thing.
You
in
do that
Angular,
for like regular language stuff, just not professional.
But like even if you're looking for a nitty gritty problem in Angular, like the answer will 9 times out of 10 be on Stack Overflow, you know.
Have you done any performance stuff with the timeline view in Chrome?
Do you mean like informally myself, is it, or is it?
Just generally.
Yeah, that's what I was using all the time, like that web page test. I threw that up there because it had a nice kind kind of screenshot of the stages in your application as well.
Yeah, but the timeline view will give you, so I think that's, yeah, you can profile that Angular as well, but timeline view will give you more of a kind of a frames per second view.
Oh, that one,
Yeah,
you mean not the network tab with the timeline, but
the actual.
Oh yeah. Actually, there's a load of stuff in that. That's almost too detailed, isn't it? Like it tells you every cycle of parsing that it's going through.
It depends what you want to do. Like if you're
like a painting, like.
Yeah, if there's animations and stuff like that, it's really important.
Yeah.
Because you'll find, like, as you build these stuff up and you have a lot of stuff going on the page, like your scrolling can get very janky and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Debugging that stuff. It's fantastic with timeline view. And it also gives you a better understanding of just how the page works and how things interact with each other.
Brilliant.
And you can do stuff like, if I turn off this box shadow, look, I've got 60 frames per second all of a sudden. You know, so you get.
Oh, that's cool. I haven't even used it. I never used it in Angular like that. Like I looked at it. I kind of used the network tab more because I'm looking at what's going on in the network.
Yeah.
But
it's more of a user experience thing, getting smooth scrolling.
Yeah.
Kind of not having things janking around the place.
Yeah, but like that's kind of worth it if you have too many events to give the trigger on Hoover and stuff. Like if you go to scrolling, the page gets kind of yanky, and they say that you gotta be below that 60 frames per second threshold or something, and be painting something. Like if you paint something before 60 frames per second, like it's not perceptible to the human eye or something.
Gotcha.
But since this side is not responsive, I should say, I haven't worried too much about it.
Well, the other thing too is like when I'm looking at the tools in Chrome, I'm thinking like this is a shit hot browser on a fucking quad core machine, you know. It probably looks nothing like this on Internet Explorer, you know.
Okay. We can continue all this stuff.
Nice one.
So thanks very much, Phil.